Hello and welcome to Learning Strategies, the live stream with Kate Benson, International Director for Education for the Society of Neurolinguistic Programming, also known as NLP. And today we are going to discuss my favorite topic, namely positive reinforcement, or how to influence behavior by using positive consequences. And this is a subject that is very strange to the field of NLP. But fortunately, Kate is using it a lot, much more than most NLPers. So let's get her on the stream. Welcome, Kate. Good to see you again.
Ghost, how are you?
I am doing great. And how's life on the Isle of Wight?
Very nice, very positive, very reinforcing.
Yes.
I have my positive reinforcement visual aid here. I don't know if you can see that it says a hug in a mug. Can you see that?
I see a bear. It's a bear.
Yeah, and it says a hug in a mug.
Okay, that is what is a hug?
It's my visual aid for today. I shall be using it later.
Good.
How are you? How are you in the Netherlands? Is it all good?
Yes. Well, we have a new wave of corona and lots of political issues, but I'm feeling great. And
it's about the same as in the UK, though. We've got 20% increase in corona and a prime minister who just keeps charging off around the world to avoid what's happening here.
Yes, he's very good at it.
Yeah, every time somebody criticises Boris, he puts a yellow high-vis jacket on and goes to a factory, which apparently makes him one of the people or something. Or he charges off to the Ukraine because they like him there.
Yes. Well, he has a typical type 3 brain, a person with a type 3 brain. They live like me for the love and attention of others, and their strategy is as long as you have an image of being very successful, then everybody will love you. And of course, if people criticize you, that are people who are not fallen for your image of success, and so they are very dangerous, and you have to take care of them. So I understand completely that he can't deal with criticism.
You're at one with Boris, are you then, Joost?
Well, I wouldn't say I disapprove. He is, of course. He is the typical type 3 that he really doesn't care one way or the other which way the UK is going, as long as it's successful and the success is rubbing off on him.
Well, I mean, actually, there's a really, really good example of that. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the Brexit debate, before we actually decided to have a vote on it, they decided to have a vote on it, but before the vote, Boris wrote he wrote 2 articles, one in favour of Brexit and one against it, both of which he was quite happy to endorse. And he just waited to see which one was going to be likely to be the most successful and then jumped.
Exactly.
So he has no ideological commitment to anything, as far as I can tell.
To himself.
To himself, yes.
Yes. So I appreciate that in Boris. That's his good points, but unfortunately, he's
terrible points.
No, that's not a good thing.
To go through your life not believing in anything other than you're wonderful. That's just awful.
He doesn't believe it. He's just trying to create this image so that other people believe it, because then he feels loved. He has this tendency. He needs to be felt loved, like me. Like President Trump, there are many other great statesmen just like Boris, but unfortunately he's embracing policies that I think are stupid, particularly the Brexit the whole thing. And
it's getting worse as well. I mean, he's now tearing up agreements that we've made now. So
yes.
Even the only decent thing that the UK has ever done in my lifetime, is my opinion, is the Good Friday Agreement. And actually brought peace to the island of Ireland, and he's about to tear that up as well.
Yes. So I disagree with the actual policies that he is putting forth, but I do understand why he's putting them forth, because he doesn't care, and He just thinks that that's the best way to ensure his own continuation as prime minister. And hopefully, and he's trying to find something to actually, because the tearing up of the all the of the agreement with the European Union. It's not about the European Union. It's just by trying to get a disagreement with Labour, so that they can fight the next election over Labour is going to repel this law. You have to vote for us because we're the only ones who are going to keep this law in the books. Just trying to set up a conflict with Labour to fight the next election over. So he really doesn't care. He only wants to be prime minister and wants to be prime minister for as long as possible.
Poor human. Poor human. That's all I can say.
Okay. Well, I love Boris.
Only because you understand him. I shall write to Boris and say there is one person. Go live in the Netherlands. There's one person in the Netherlands, Boris, who understands you
and loves him. Loves
him.
Yeah.
He just goes around finding new women to love him and have children with, as far as I can see.
It's another typical type 3 successful worker behavior. For the unhealthy ones, to be clear, I'm of course very healthy. I'm not running around trying to find women to get children with.
No.
Yet.
So anyway, there we are, back on the neurogram again.
Yes. It's one of the most important subjects. It might even be more important than positive reinforcement, which is the subject for today. You were already holding up your mug. As hugging is, of course, a positive
reinforcement. Yes, and if you put a hug in a mug, it becomes a prize.
It's just too much English for my brain. But to be clear, presenting a mug is not a positive consequence. It's an antecedent.
No. I thought I had a plan for today.
Good.
Have you got a plan for today, or would you like to hear my plan for today? Well, my plan for today, so I don't know if you noticed, but I sort of renamed our talk today, the pragmatist and the philosopher, because I think that, basically positive reinforcement, we both do from completely different perspectives. So we do this similar things for the same reason, but they're arrived at that reason from a very different way. So I thought, because you have a lot more information about how and why it works than I do, but I thought it might be quite useful for me to sort of explain how I use it in teaching excellence from a point of view of actually how I arrived at the decision to use positive reinforcement.
Right.
From a pragmatist point of view, and then you could then take us into all the ABC model about it. How does that sound like a good strategy?
It's a perfect strategy,
except
for only one thing, and that is that it seems to be that you are trying to make a split or a distinction between a pragmatist and a philosopher. Whereas, of course, pragmatism is one of the major schools within philosophy, and in fact, I am a pragmatist philosopher.
So, okay, well, all right, two pragmatists, one of whom is a philosopher, then.
Yes, but I'm not. But the problem, of course, is that most people, when they hear the term pragmatism within philosophy, think that pragmatism has anything to do with being practical, and it just hasn't. This pragmatism in philosophy just means that you have other values than just truth. So most philosophers are.
True. I do have other, yes, because I'm not arguing that this is true. I'm not arguing that this is true, and I'm not arguing. I'm just arguing that it works.
Yes, but that it works is another value than truth. So that is then you are a pragmatist with a capital P, as you wrote on Facebook. But it's not pragmatism because it works. It is pragmatism because you value other things than truth. And in fact, I think truth doesn't exist, or at least it doesn't exist outside of philosophy and outside of logic and mathematics. You can define truth within mathematics and within logic, but outside there is no truth. There's only probability. But again, that's a pragmatist point of view. So if you cleared up that.
Yes, I got a T-shirt that I nearly bought you a T-shirt, and then I remembered that you used to really hate it when your mother bought you T-shirts?
I like your T-shirts because you bought me a devil one once in Ibiza.
Well, this one says, I might buy it for you anyway then, but I'll spoil the surprise. But this one says, I might be wrong, but it's highly unlikely.
Oh, that's a great one. Yes, and I actually wear a lot of T-shirts outside of the camera and outside of the
I'm going to order it for you then. I'm going to order it for you because I saw it and I thought, Joost has to wear this T-shirt.
Because my mother, the only T-shirt that I regular wear is actually given by my mother. And it has a quote of a philosopher, of Schopenhauer, and it says, "The worst has yet to come." Which was, that's how I go shopping, especially during the Corona time. People were really like, what? Why would you? That's the most famous quote from Schopenhauer is, "The worst has yet to come," which is true. The worst has yet to come, but the best is also yet to come. The biggest world war has yet to come. The biggest mass murder has yet to come. But the greatest happiness and the greatest ecological salvation of our planet also has yet to come. Everything that is over the top has yet to come.
Shall we get back to our subject for the day?
We'll try, yes. Let's see how long we stick with it.
Right, so I'm going to talk about the use of reward and how I came to decide to use reward in teaching. Now, teachers have used reward for, forever and ever. People use rewards all the time, but I suppose to use it consciously and effectively is actually what we're talking about.
If I can interrupt you immediately.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how this is with the English teachers. How is it? Teachers training, but in Dutch, the positive reinforcement is, very much trained, especially for kindergarten and early.
It's positive reinforcement. It's trained in, and it's used in primary school a lot. So it's lots and lots of praise, lots and lots of good feelings, and that sort of stuff. So yes, it's well within the education system. But the further up the education system you go, the less reward is used, and it becomes that, I suppose, the pendulum swings. So it moves from lots of positive reward and not much attention to the negative stuff,
right,
to an equal amount of positive and negative. So well done to you, Joost, because you did really well in your exam, but you're rubbish because you didn't. Or I'm not really, I'm very disappointed in you because you didn't. So you end up with a 50-50 of positive reward and negative, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
Yes.
And then...
But ratio is already very negative.
Yes, of course it is. And so the pendulum then swings. And of course, then what happens is the children who are getting a lot of the negative reinforcement, that behavior then magnifies, and there is less and less positive to reinforce. So you end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy where you get the good kids who are getting all the rewards, who turn into the good adults who get all the rewards, and you get the bad kids who get all the negative reinforcement and no rewards, and in fact punishments, and then that behavior perpetuates as well. So that by the time when I would, and then they go and then they leave school, right? And the good kids go off to do more nice university things or whatever, and the bad kids don't. So the kids that I work with, as a lot of people will know, and you will know, were often those kids who'd had tons of that. And they came into college to do, basically because, again, with a negative intention. It wasn't even given positively. It wasn't like, you'd be really good at carpentry or cookery or engineering. It was like, well, you can't go to university, so you better go and do this. Right. So it's not even arriving through the door was their shoulders were down. So these kids came in, especially the boys. There were some issues with the girls, but especially the young men who were sort of 15, 16, 17 by this time. And I was there, bright young thing, bursting with enthusiasm, spreading good feeling everywhere, whatever, but it wasn't having any effect at all, because they were looking at me like, well, who are you then?
Right.
And the light behind their eyes was out. There was just this dull, disinterested, this isn't for me, this isn't interesting, you know, whatever. They were just dull. There was nothing behind their eyes. So I thought, and then, of course, but the only time you got a light behind their eyes was when they were, quote, misbehaving.
Okay.
So when they were laughing at each other's dirty jokes, they were having sex or talking about sex, or they were taking drugs, or they were talking about taking drugs, or they were being cheeky.
Reinforcement.
Yeah, and they were being cheeky, and therefore they were feeling, you know, and they were getting won over on an adult, so they were feeling proud of themselves and like they were gaining respect from the peers. All of these things, these behaviours, which were deemed in the education environment to be negative, were giving them those good feelings, and those, as you'll probably talk about, you know, the chemical neurological responses that made them feel good. So they were getting, so and so in the brain.
Well, that in fact is positive reinforcement. So this is the whole issue that you see everywhere in education, but also in big companies, is that you have undesired behavior that gets positive reinforced, and you have desired behavior that either gets no reinforcement or even gets negative reinforcement or negative consequences. So that's the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. But they were self-generating this, remember? So they were in good. So at the break times and at the lunch times and before they came into class and after they left class, they were doing all this. And then, of course, it overspilled into class. So they were doing. So then it was a case of, well, who's in charge here? You know, well, because
you say they are doing it, but it's actually how the brain works. So the brain will just do whatever gets positive consequences, and positive consequences in their eyes. It is, we might think that sex during breaks on the school is not a positive consequence. It's bad, but if you're a teenager, it's a very good positive consequence.
So exactly. So all the things that the establishment, the school, or whatever thought were, not everything, but a lot of the things that they thought were negative and behaviors that they shouldn't have been doing, then they were doing, and they were getting this positive reward for. So, you know, and I was not particularly judgmental of any of this behavior because I was quite young myself.
Your type 7 head in this brain. You were going, go, yay!
Not quite, but it was like, you know, okay, I understood, a bit like you and Boris. I understood where they were coming from and what they were doing. Well, I didn't understand why they were doing it, but I could see that, you know, what they were getting from it. So I thought I needed to bring that. I needed to be able to get them having those responses in my class.
Right.
But of course, they weren't, by this time, they weren't doing much.
No.
That was the behavior that we really did want. So I started to,
again, one moment, even if they don't do much of the desired behaviors, if they do even the smallest thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm just about to say. Yeah. So I decided, if you like, to NLP term, to reframe all of their behavior as far as I could possibly do it into something positive. So, you know, one of the things, very simple examples, they all turned up late. They turned up any time from when they were supposed to walk through the door at 10 to 9 to, you know, 10 minutes before the class finished. They all wandered in and out at different
times. I can't remember that you were teaching at my high school, but that sounds that you're describing my behavior.
Yeah. So of course the behavior. What happened every time they did that with most of the teachers was they got, you know, ticked off, told off, a negative consequence. Sit over there. We're not paying you any attention at all because you've not bothered to turn up. I'm paying, you know, whatever. So
one moment. Not getting attention by the teacher is a positive consequence.
Well, yes and yeah, no, but what if you had any relationship with them and they like you at all, then it just reinforces the coming in late. So if you're dreading coming into a class and you come in 10, and because of that you drag your heels, or you get the later bus, or you don't rush into class, so you're walking more slowly and you arrive 10 minutes late, and then you get belittled or ridiculed in some way, then as you're walking to the class the next day, instead of thinking about, hey, Kate's going to be there and it'll be cool, they're thinking, oh God, when I go in, it's going to be, I'm going to feel bad again. So there's less and less motivation to go in.
Exactly.
So the thing to do is to change that. So the
first so if someone walks into the classroom already feeling bad and negative, the actual behavior is walking into the classroom.
Yes.
If walking into the classroom is then get negative consequences because the teacher goes, oh, you're late, you're going to be punished, and you're an idiot, then you're just adding up more negative consequences to the desired behavior, because walking into the classroom was the desired behavior.
Exactly. So what I then decided to do was that any desired behavior, so if they walked in the classroom, whatever time they walked into the classroom and they were positively reinforced for that. Basically, I said to them, oh, well done, you got here. Fantastic. We're doing this, right? So everything they did and anything that they did that was, I looked for what they were doing that was right. And if the only thing they were doing was right was that they were here, then that got rewarded. So then quite quickly, they stopped, then I might say that, well done, you got here, have a sweet. I've come on to the intrinsic and extrinsic stuff at the moment. But the first thing was just my praise and my reward, which was, but of course it didn't. And so they did stop. They did stop a lot of that behavior. And they started, so I'd say, for example, hey, well done, you got here. I'd say that for a week. And then the next Monday, I would say, hey, well done, you got here again. What needs to happen for you to get here 5 minutes earlier? Is there anything I could do to help you to get here 5 minutes earlier? So that we start to move them in the direction of arriving, prior to that. So that sort of worked, that just changing, that reframing everything that they did into something. What is it that's positive? If they were sitting having a very heated and a big argument about football, then rather than going like, you're making a lot of noise and you're not doing the subject and all those things, I'd go, hey, this group really knows how to debate.
Right.
And it's really good that you're having a really heated debate, but you're not swearing and you're being reasonable with each other. That's great. We could use that in the next time we do X or whatever. So those sorts of things. So everything that I could, I looked for in NLP terms, I looked for the positive intention in every behavior, and I rewarded that. But still, there was a credibility gap because I'm, young, middle-class woman, and they're big, boisterous, twice the size of me, strapping young men, and I didn't have a lot of credibility.
Right. But also, the positive consequences that you were giving were, of course, rather small, and the positive consequences they got from their peers for being those are much bigger.
Yeah, exactly. They were much bigger and much better. So there was still a lot of pressure, if you like, on that cost-benefit analysis to get the vibe, to get the good vibes from their peers rather than from me. And then there was another aspect to this as well, which was actually something that you'd be quite interested in this, because I just stumbled across when I was doing my teacher training, because I did my teacher training sort of on the job. I used to go off 1 day a week on a day release. Right. And somebody sort of, I don't know how it came back, but somebody was talking about programmed learning.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, now we have a lot of this on the computers, but back in the day, in the dark ages, used to get the programmed learning with these manuals where everything was broken down into the most minuscule steps. So the idea was that the learning, you would if you went through all the steps meticulously and in sequence, you would gather this learning. So I found a program. A program learning program about teaching program learning, right? So I photocopied all of this thing, huge, great thing, and went off because I had to do a teaching presentation and did this teaching presentation. And I knew I wasn't going to get through it because it was tomes of the stuff, but I gave it out in a very boring way. I went in and I said, right, I'm going to teach about program learning, and this is how you're going to learn about program learning. And I gave each of the teachers in the class one of these, and I said, okay, well, you've got like half an hour to learn about program learning, and sat down like that and watched. And my tutor, who was I don't know what neurogram type he was, probably a helper or something like this, but he was into constant bailout. Whenever he thought something wasn't going well, he wanted to bail you out. And he was obviously thinking they're not liking it and she's not doing,
right.
And it was all quite deliberate on my part. And he was desperately trying to come in and say something and make it. And I kept sort of just telling him to shh. And then I waited about 10 minutes. I couldn't last much more than 10 minutes. And I just said, I want you to put your pens down and I want you to write on a piece of paper how you feel.
Right.
So they all wrote them on a piece of paper. They weren't allowed to teach. And then they said, and it was like bored, despondent, disengaged, angry, and within 10 minutes, I turned this enthusiastic bunch of new teachers into those, quote, reluctant learners, those boys, if you like. So that was a really good sort of test for me. I mean, there was a lot of different levels to that, but for me, it just showed you that, that it was dead easy to get people to be turned off learning and much harder to keep them turned on. So then I said I needed to up the reward, but this got quite interesting because I thought so then I, as you know, I sweets, stickers, prizes, whatever. But if you give, what I learned quite early on is if you give big prizes, it actually has a very negative effect on everybody else. There has to be a lot of them. And they have to be relatively freely available and easy to get, at least to start with.
Yes.
So stickers and sweets and things. Whereas if you have the one big prize on your desk, you've got your big cup and you go like the person at the end of the year who does best will get this. Isn't as motivating as going every 10 minutes people get a sticker.
It is dismotivating because this is well studied within applied behavioral analysis, because if you make one winner in a group of 20, you create 19 losers.
Exactly. So I learned very quickly, everybody had to be a winner. And you had to be very generous with, initially at least, very generous with the stickers and the praise and whatever.
Yes.
And you'll see that in Teaching Excellence. I do that. The first day, everybody gets everything, whatever. And as the days go on, the prizes, they get slightly sparser or more randomized, and to keep the motivation level. Because if you just constantly give them out all the time, then that loses the intrinsic reward as well.
Also studied a lot by applied behavioral analysis. In the early days, you just reinforce every single moment that someone behaves in a desired way, and then you start to water it down. Then they have to do twice the work for getting the same reward, and then 3 times so much or 4 times, and in the end you randomize it because unexpected rewards have a much bigger impact in our brain than expected rewards.
Well, exactly that. So to begin with, everybody got everything really quite, liberally.
Right.
Then they had to work a tiny bit harder for it, a tiny bit more, and so the ante was up. But then the gamble came in. I don't know who's going to get this. I'm not sure who's going to win this prize for this one yet. And so the pass the parcel game. I play at the end of Teaching Excellence is an example of that randomized reward. Everybody gets something as they go along to keep the motivation going, but we don't know who's going to get the big reward.
Yes.
But even the big reward is never that big, because
again, we don't want to create losers.
People will then set something. I wanted that. It's got to be something that's accessible. Oh, it's nice that person's got that.
Exactly.
So that's. And so that was what I found began to work. And I got a lot of criticism from other teachers because one group, one argument that they came up with is that people should do things for their own intrinsic reward.
Yes, unfortunately, it doesn't exist.
Let
me explain a little bit, because people often talk about intrinsic motivation. Often psychologists but it's complete rubbish. It doesn't exist. It is a made-up thing. And if you look at how they discover that you have intrinsic motivation, then they just describe external circumstances. The best example is Messi. I don't know whether you know Messi, but he's probably the most famous football player. And they say, why? Sorry?
I don't know any footballers.
Messi is the number one on the world for years and years and years. But anyway, they explain why he is so good at football. And the explanation goes like this. They say, yeah, well, Messi Messi has a lot of intrinsic motivation to play football. And why does he have this intrinsic motivation? Because he likes to play football that much. No, it's just sure he gets good feelings by playing football, but he first has to play football, then he feels good, and then his brain is going to be addicted to football, and that's what we call extrinsic motivation. There is no such thing as intrinsic motivation. Whenever people come up with intrinsic motivation, they just forget about all the extrinsic stuff that happened before people were before they got addicted to certain behaviors.
Yeah, that's right. And usually what you'll find is that those people, in fact, there was a footballer, a sportsman, I can't remember what his name was, on the TV yesterday morning. He was quite a funny little article about how to win at the school parents' races. Right. I don't know if you do this in Holland, but we have sports days for the children, fun sports days. And they always have some races for the parents to join in with. Right. And very famously, there's a very famous picture of Princess Diana running barefooted at the boys' school races. Mm-hmm. And so they have this ridiculous thing about they had an athlete, an international athlete, teaching you how to win the egg and spoon race and pass the baton and do the sack race and all of these stupid things. But one of the things that he said, and he was just a little aside, that he'd gone to school and a teacher said to him, he was joining in with sports, running around. Children like to run around, they like to do stuff. And this teacher said, I've never seen anybody with such raw talent as you. Right. And that just laid his life out before him, because and this teacher wanted to support him and help him, because he said, but that very phrase in himself, you say that to a child, it's like, well, okay, I've got all this raw talent, I feel good, I want to use it, how much better can I feel? And so it usually starts with something like that, somebody else's belief that you can do something is often. And so what these kids had that I had, they had none of that. They had nobody who believed in them. And I think, one of the things that I say is that, your job as a teacher is to hold out more hope for your students than they have for themselves. Right. And it's okay if they go, well, I can't do this, or I'm stupid and I can't do this. You go, like, I know you think that. I know that's what you believe. However, I don't believe that. And I know, because I've taught hundreds of people like you to do this, I know I can teach you to do it. Then they can relax and go, okay, I don't need to, doesn't matter what I believe or think. I can just get into this.
To be clear, if you're saying someone has to believe in you when you're a very young age, of course, you have to discover that someone is believing in you.
I'm not saying everybody has to, but that's one of the ways that quite often people start to this whole idea of intrinsic reward develops. But it's not because somebody has praised you for being who you are.
That's where I wanted to go. Because if a person just believes in you but doesn't praise you or doesn't give compliments, then it doesn't work. It's actually the praise.
Of course, they could say it and not believe it. That would be fine. Apart from it would be incongruent. But the point is, if they could say it with enough truth and it wasn't true, and I would do that with kids. I would say to kids, you're very clever. Yeah. Or you're very bright. And it doesn't necessarily be true. It doesn't really matter. I just want them to hear it. I want them to hear it and feel and to internalize it in some way.
And the second point is that, of course, research has shown that it is much more important to actually praise effort than praise being. So if you are going to praise the young kids, tell them that oh, wow, you really worked hard at this. That is why you got this reward. Because then they continue to work hard. And if you say, you got this reward because you're just a wonderful prince or princess, then their brain goes, oh, I don't have to do anything. It's just, I am like this.
Yeah, and actually it's really research on this actually shows in terms of, and I see this now with so many princes and princesses around, and parents who just reward their children for their very existence. I see people looking admiringly at their product, you know,
right.
they've produced, like this is of any value. No, it's of no value at all. You know, anybody can reproduce. Animals do it all the time. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's harder not to, you know. It's like, you know, so, but there's all of this, you know, my wonderful children, my, you know, and people, you know, I hear women saying, oh, you know, she is my 8-year-old. She's my best friend. Well, what's wrong with you? Why would you want an 8-year-old as a best friend, for God's sake? You know, how ridiculous is that? You know, get a friend of your own age. You know, your job isn't to be your children's best friend; it's to be your parent.
Exactly.
And what, you know, what this research shows, and this actually finally seems to get through to some of the parents. So if you say you take 2 groups of children and you test them. And that's their baseline, say, for example, that's their baseline. And this half you reward for having done very, very well because you're clever.
Exactly.
And this one you reward for very, very well because you put it, you gave your maximum effort. You put all your effort into it.
Yes.
And then you retest them a week later with the same test. This group, the clever group, do worse.
Yes.
And this group, the effort group, do better.
Yes.
Because they come in going, I put effort in, so I'll put more effort in. This bloke goes, I'm clever, I don't need to bother anymore.
Exactly.
And so that, you know, the whole effort and cleverness thing. Yes. However,
let me add to this, because I work with superstar football talents from 15 till 18, and if you see the amount of extreme discipline that they put into their sporting career, it's absurd. These are I just talked to a 15-year-old boy. Well, when I was 15, I was just going to all kinds of things. But he's on this track to become a pro player, and he's just going discipline. And he has a type 9 mediator brain, which are the most undisciplined of all the brain types. But that's also how it makes it difficult to recognize them for me, because they're just so extremely disciplined. Are you undisciplined? No, I wake up every day at 6 a.m. At 7 a.m. I'm at the training track working, and the amount of effort that they put into it to become a pro player is such a lot of effort. And I also coach young kids, a little bit younger, like 13 years, whose parents think that they have great talent, but who basically do not put in the effort. They do put in a lot of effort. They want to make it to a pro player as well. But if you compare it to the real pro players, it's just like it's this amount of effort for the amateur, and it's like, well, this amount of effort for the pro players.
Yeah, well, I saw that, of course, with Tom. Because Tom was a very, very keen footballer and quite a talented footballer. I mean, he did put a lot of effort in, but not to that level. I mean, he made quite a lot of sacrifices as well. You know, he went away to school so that he could get a scholarship for his football. And so he lived away from home at quite a vulnerable age and stuff. But then what happened was that the structure provided the discipline for him, as long as he just went along with what the coach said, you know, because somebody got you up in the morning and your food was prepared for you and you went off and trained and whatever. But, you know, he did put a lot of hours in, but you could see the difference. And, you know, they were playing at national level, these boys, but, you know, you could see the ones that were likely to be in the England squad or playing. Yes.
The level of fanaticism that is completely different from normal people. Yes. But also,
one other point, which, you know, it's like all of these things, we must never sort of generalize to the point where we lose sight of all, you know, other factors that also influence things. Because I absolutely agree with the effort thing, but also when somebody has never been rewarded for something.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't believe, and when you change somebody's belief in some way, that can often just impact on their behavior in terms of what they chase. So I have two examples of this. One is, again, back in the education setting, and I was given a group of young women mainly who were doing health and social care. So somebody got like, oh, you know, they're girls and they'll look after children. You know, it wasn't even a nursery nursing course. It wasn't, you know, it was a health and social care, quite a low level course. But somebody in their wisdom has decided that they should do a GCSE or GCSE sociology,
right?
Because this was an easy qualification to get. Now these girls hadn't even got their English and maths, you know, which was pretty fundamental. But somebody decided this, and I was given this job of teaching these kids this GCSE sociology. And again, I had a sort of, you know, blank. They were quite happy when they were in the nursery. They're doing work experience where they were doing things that, you know, were quite hands-on, or that but this stuff, you know, women's rights, you know,
right.
History of the suffragette movement. I was not doing it for them. And by the Christmas, I wasn't doing a good job. I was, in my book, failing them. So I went to see a woman who was very successful at teaching this subject. And I said, come on, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Teach me how to do it. And she had a really quite a rigorous and rather dull formula, but it worked, you know, and it involved exploring an essay every week, going through the main points, giving them a chapter to read. Then they wrote the essay. It was quite dull, but I dragged them through this next 2 terms, and they all did this GCSE. And I paced up inside this door because I was really aware that we'd set these girls up, and if they didn't get this piece of paper, this was yet another, you know, nail in the coffin of their belief in themselves, you know.
Right.
Anyway, most of them they did pass, but you know, some of them only just, but one young girl, young woman, who was 21, and she already had 2 children, or maybe 3 children, and had done nothing in her life at all. This one piece of paper changed everything that she believed about herself.
Right.
She then went on to do her English, her maths, or whatever. She then trained as a nurse, and now she is now a senior matron at a hospital.
Right.
And you know, so sometimes it's that one thing that turns. It's not necessarily an intrinsic a reward-based learning. It's just you drag somebody there, and it's a belief change. Something happens that changes a belief in who they are, and that's why.
Of course, you have to initiate. If you have certain desired behavior and people never do it, then you can't reward it. So you have to do. That's why the antecedents are also important. You have to make sure that people do it at least a couple of times. But your example, when she went on to learn more and study more, if she would not have gotten rewards out of that, then she would have stopped doing it and said, "Oh, I thought that I was better than I thought, but that was a mistake." So there's also a lot of luck involved, especially for our work as coaches and trainers, because we cannot follow people constantly.
No,
that's the good thing about if you have a classroom and you see your students or pupils every day or a couple of days a week, then at least you can constantly keep track of them and keep rewarding them. But for trainers and coaches, this is really difficult.
Yes.
So we're having built a app where you can have buddies, and where they will say, "Oh, I just did this NLP technique, and it feels really good." And then the buddy sees that, and the buddy says, "Wow, great, keep doing it." So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And you know, the body systems work in lots of different situations, whether it's work environments or whatever. But yeah, that whole thing about the fulcrum point, sometimes it's that you never know when you're going to find that person's fulcrum point, whether it's in a coaching session or in a classroom or whatever. And when that happens, that's often a massive springboard to change people's and the pleasure, the reward that they get from that one thing is so massive. You know, opening that piece of paper and seeing the certificate, for example, or, you know, is such a massive reward that just thinking about it in the future, provides more motivation. Oh, I want to feel like that again. That was such a good feeling. I want to feel like that again. So they chase it then.
But it's only for people who actually, of course, the one thing that always goes wrong with positive reinforcement is having managers or teachers or parents fill in what would be rewarding for the other. But of course, that doesn't work. It only works with something that you or I or the person involved actually thinks that is a reward.
Absolutely. It's not going to be, it's like teachers, like people saying, well, if you work really hard and you do very well and you study and you don't go out at weekends or whatever, you can go to university, get a really good job, and you can be like me. And then they're like, what on earth do I want to be like you for?
Exactly.
You're the last person I want to be like.
So that you can. I always say, if I coach teenagers, to girls, I say, okay, pay attention to what I'm going to do. It will help you make more money on the short term. You will get more richer within a couple of weeks or months. And to boys, I say, okay, pay attention because this will get you money quick and sex.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then somehow they pay more attention.
Absolutely. It's like my boy in the Ferrari. My favorite story about the boy in the Ferrari who wanted to be able to drive past the school and stick 2 fingers up at his geography teacher.
Right.
And that was his motivation, and everything was measured against how close he was getting to having the Ferrari to be able to do this, And then you have to get them also to, and the rewards needs to reward the behavior that gets you there, not
exactly.
the outcome.
Yes.
Because that's there is a massive reward in getting the certificate, getting the Ferrari, whatever. But actually, it's each step of the reward, the behavior needs to drive the change in its direction that counts. Because you may never get the Ferrari, but everything that you're rewarded for that gets you in a direction puts your life in a better place than it would have been.
Yeah, also, but if you are handing out rewards, and I recommend it to everyone to hand out as much rewards as you can. For instance, compliments. Compliments is most people think if they hear the word reward, they think monetary things, and you need to pay people. But compliments work wonder, and most people like compliments. And so for most people, compliments are rewards. But you have to. When you're language patterning, that's why NLP is such a brilliant technology. You have to make sure that you, connect the compliment to the desired behavior. Yes. Because we know there's a very dark, shadowy side to compliments. Because if you hand out compliments without a regard of anything, and this is the prototypical. I'm more into business and managers. But this is the very popular manager that walks around on the department saying, "Hey, Joost, how are you doing? Going well? Great. I'm looking at you." Well, you're just going, I'm hating this day, and I'm just playing Minesweeper all day. So we know that is very negative. That is a very negative consequence. But if you combine, I say, "Hey, Joost, I just saw that you wrote the report. I really liked the report. I read through it. I thought your passage about the risk management was very well written, so that you know that, okay, he actually read it." And then you combine it, the compliment to the desired behavior. That works really well. But so that's
absolutely. And because it's, the other thing, that 2 things happen. A, you don't do any, if you play Minesweeper all day, there's nothing in what the manager's doing that gets you to do the things that are more useful for the company. And, right. And secondly, it undermines your view of the manager. It makes the next genuine compliment. Or I would say, I don't think it's compliment. I think it's praise. I think there's a difference between a compliment.
Okay, enlighten me.
I think we're both quite nice, but praise is what people seek. They want you to be, and it needs to be.
What's the difference? Because for me, a compliment and praise would be the same, but maybe just my lack of understanding English. Can you?
I don't know. I mean, I just think a compliment tends to be about somebody's physical appearance or about, I don't know. Praise says that I personally really value what you've just done, and right. and I'm stopping.
I think it's a translation error. It is lost in translation.
I'm going to have
for us in Dutch. A compliment is praise. It's pretty much the same. But if you say a compliment, I'm going to praise people whenever I'm talking in English.
Yeah, well, I just think I think it's a more straightforward word, praise. It's an
right.
You give somebody a compliment, so a compliment is a noun in that sense, whereas praise is a verb to
right.
praise. So I suppose in that sense, it's the doing bit that I'm getting at. I suppose that's
okay. Yes, but receiving a compliment or receiving praise would be the same.
Well, you receive a compliment, as in a noun, whereas you receive. Well, I suppose so. Yeah, it would be a noun too. Okay, well, semantics. But
no, but it is just a subtle language differences where there is something. I just done a whole podcast on the how do you call it in English? The undetermination of translation versus the determination of theories by data. That's a very interesting podcast that nobody listens to.
It's a very Yoast podcast.
Yeah, no, that's just a major issue within philosophy. So
sure it is. I'm sure lots of philosophers will really appreciate the fact you've done that podcast.
Yeah, if they knew it, that they would love it. I know it.
They love it, yes.
But that's in principle you cannot find the right interpretation of text. You cannot find the right interpretation of what people are saying or writing. It's always a interpretation. So you can never know.
I think what would be really useful because of in terms of art, because you would explain this so much better than I will. You will explain it better than I will. Is actually you mentioned before about antecedents.
Yes.
And it might be useful for people just to hear that summary of that process of the ABC model.
So there is the ABC model, which is the heart of something called applied behavioral analysis. It's actually a real science that is being taught at universities. And the ABC model is very simplistic, but also extremely handy. The B in the ABC model stands for behavior. The A stands for antecedents, and antecedents is everything that is happening before the behavior or that is necessary to make the behavior possible. And for instance, if you want to have someone phone somebody else, then you need to have a phone. You can't phone people without a phone. So a phone is an antecedent. And consequences, C stands for consequences. Consequences is basically everything that happens after the behavior. So most people, most coaches, trainers, teachers, managers, they think that if you tell somebody beforehand how they should behave, that they are going to behave like that. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Research shows people do what is being rewarded. So they do more of what gets them positive consequences and they do less of what gets them negative consequences. So rather than, when you try to influence someone, rather than thinking in terms of antecedents, how can I talk to this person and steer him in the right direction? It's much better to think in terms of how can I reward him whenever he does the desired behavior according to my standards, and make sure that we get negative consequences whenever he does undesired behaviors. That's much more important. Of course, you need antecedents to get people to do it at least once or twice so that you can get the rewarding system in place. But it's a really, I say, a big mind shift if people stop thinking in terms of, I have to tell beforehand how I want them to behave, to switch to, no, we're going to reward whenever people behave in a way that is nice. One more thing, when I say we want to have negative consequences for undesired behaviors, in reality we don't do that, because most negative consequences in fact do stop the undesired behavior, but replace the undesired behavior with different undesired behavior. For instance, if you punish people, they stop doing whatever they are being punished for, but they get angry. If you, give people a penalty because they behaved in an undesired way, again, that undesired behavior stops, but it's replaced by sadness. So in reality, we have only one negative consequence, that is actually taking away our attention by ignoring someone. Most people, not all people, but most people like to have attention of other people, And if you take away the attention, that is a negative consequence. So for most of the time, like say 80%, you use positive consequences for desired behaviors. And in 20% of the time, you use negative consequences. And then most of the time, basically ignoring people.
I agree with that, and I use that all the time. It's just to I used to take my energy out of somebody who's doing something I don't want to do, and people will usually randomly, first of all, the behavior will quite often spiral up for a while, because it's like, well, I'll carry on doing this more to see if I do get behavior, but then you don't get attention. Because they don't get attention that way, they then have to randomly try different things, and as soon as they shut up, even if that's the thing, if they're noisy or whatever, that's when they get a moment of attention, because they're finally doing something I want. So that, that's about paying attention to the process, especially in a group. If you're working in a group, to hit those moments and be very attentive to the different people in a group who are doing that. I think one of the other things to say about negative consequences is, one of the things that I've found, and I don't know what the explanation of this would be, I just happen to know it's true or that it works, is that if I'm negotiating with somebody over their behavior, whether that's in a coaching or a disciplinary situation or whatever, if I specify what the rewards of a behavior are, and I unspecify the negative consequences,
yes,
I find that works much better, because they will fill in. So if I say to you, Jos, if you turn up on time for work and we do this work well together, then what you're going to see is we're going to have a great relationship, and we'll be able to go out for dinner and eat nice, assuming you'd like to do that. Finding things that I know you would like to do. We can go out to dinner and we can discuss fine wines. I'll even drink Riesling because I know you like that. But, if you don't, you just really won't like me very much, and you won't like what's going to happen. And I say that you just won't like it. You then fill in all the things that you don't like without me having to specify them.
Yes.
If I specify them, then the chances are you probably, unless I know you really well, the chances are, well, that's not too bad, or, well, that doesn't. So if I just go, you won't like it if, then you fill in all the things that you don't like, and you'll be moved towards the specified positive reward.
Yes.
And away from the unspecified negative reward, negative consequences.
So we call this promising and threatening. Threatening, of course, is negative. So there is positive reinforcement. There's also negative reinforcement, which is basically threatening people with negative consequences, but that they can have a way to avoid those negative consequences by doing the behavior. And you can see with both with positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement that the desired behaviors actually increase. But the problem with negative reinforcement is that the desires only increase up until the moment that the threat is cancelled.
Yes.
So you can see that with positive reinforcement, if people can do much more, they will do as much as they can because they get all these rewards that they like. But with negative reinforcement, it is just till the cut-off line where they say, "Oh, now I'm safe. I have done just enough to avoid the negative consequences. Okay, I've stopped doing it."
And that absolutely, and that ties in with what we were talking about a few weeks ago about the difference between commitment and compliance. So the person will, with the negative consequences, they will just about comply to avoid the negative consequences. But of course, if they don't know what they are, then compliance doesn't really work, because they don't quite know what it is that they need to do to avoid whatever it is they don't quite know, because it's just unspecified. It's the unspecified monster.
Yeah.
So it avoids that compliance. But normally, if you specify the negative consequences, you get compliance. If you specify the positive consequences and rewards, then you get commitment to that. So people carry on chasing it. So it's a sort of that whole thing, but I'll just do enough to stop being punished, rather than I'll keep going because I get more reward. So that's about the desire, the amount of desire for something.
Orlando also we have a remark for Orlando. Hello, Orlando. Good to have you around.
Oh, we got.
Back to compliment and praise. I'm trying to get it in for a couple of times already.
All right.
Orlando says, to me, a compliment feels like it's directed at the behavior or result. Praise is personal, praising the person.
Okay.
Well, I would say that we always only praise the behavior, and both as a praise and as a compliment.
Yeah, but you can. It's a bit more subtle than that, Jos, because sometimes you want to make that you praise the behavior and then associate it with being a sort of person who people like that. So you take the so if I sort of say if I say to somebody, say I'm talking to a child, I say, thank you very much for taking care of the girl sitting next to you, or thank you very much for helping the girl sitting next to you. That was a very nice thing to do. That I'm praising the behavior. But if I then say you're a very kind person,
yes,
then that actually takes that behavior and it puts it into a sort of value of the person.
Yes.
And then
I'm all in favor of hypnotizing everyone you around you. So if you then add complex equivalences to them, so they identify with being a certain person that you want them to be, perfect, nothing wrong with it. But I'm just trying to point out that is an additional step, which is not, in my view, the compliment or the praise per se. That is just hypnosis, to make them think that they are a certain person, so they'll do more of what you want them to do.
But they'll do more. Yes, yeah. Well, or do more of what would be helpful for them to do.
Yes, what I say, that you want them to do what you want them to do.
Oh, that's what you would say. Well, I want them to do. Oh, here we go. Wait.
Praise is often linked. Again, this is a remark by Orlando. Praise is often linked with praising God. Not many songs about complimenting God in English. Quite a difference. Yes, I also think that in Dutch we don't compliment God that much. Of course, we're also quite heathens, so that might be part of it. But yes, but I would say that if you're going to praise God, please praise Him for His deeds or her deeds, and not for just being a God.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to contemplate a bit more the difference between a compliment and praise. I think those are very useful, Orlando, and I'm going to think a bit more about what I mean about that. But I would usually talk about praise rather than compliment. And yeah, I would praise a child rather than compliment a child, I suppose.
Right. I'm going to remember that. I'm just also again, it is a translation error. Don't think that there's a good translation of praise to Dutch.
Oh, okay.
So we have actually there is a very easy translation. As praise becomes prijzen, but prijzen, if you translate it back to English, becomes pricing. And so, of course, praise and price is also, of course, quite linked closely. But you will probably, if I say, well, Kate, again, I'm very happy. We've run over the hour. I'm very happy with your behavior. You did another wonderful stream on positive reinforcement. Really, really valuable. So I'm going to price you at €250. It's not. It's.
Well, you never pay me, Joost.
I know, but it does sound different from praising you. You just.
Yes.
But in Dutch,
I mean, we have those words like appraisal as well. They're all very interesting sort of.
Yes, so in Dutch, praising is much more closer to actually putting a monetary value on someone. So I think that might probably be the difference in translation.
Yeah, that would not be the case, and I wouldn't. Yeah. But to prize somebody is to value them in English. So
Definitely, yes.
It's not to give them money; it's to value them.
That's what I do with the football players. We're actually trying to sell. We can't sell humans. We try to move them from one club to another club for a lot of money. That is not human trafficking. It is legal.
Legal human trafficking.
Legal human trafficking, but they do have to move from club to club.
Mm.
Good.
Well, that was very interesting.
All right.
I hope people have enjoyed it. Have we got any more comments before we go?
I don't think so. But if you have questions or remarks for Kate, this is your last and final chance for this week, because we will be back next week, I think. Let me double check it.
What are we doing next week? What are we talking about next week?
The next topic, I think. We haven't got a topic yet, but we will come up with a topic.
We will have a topic for next week. I know the next one was actually exams, but we're not going to do a revision for exams, but we're not going to do that because most people have finished their exams.
Yes, so we'll skip that one.
Put that later on in when it becomes more pertinent for people.
Will do. All right, we'll figure it out next week. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, people who are listening or viewing it later. Bye-bye, and we'll see each other next week. Bye.
Bye.